Floods in China, droughts in Canada, and frost in Brazil. What do all these things have in common? They're all weather events being made worse by climate change, and they are having a profound impact on consumer prices.
We clearly see inflation now in the United States.
It is obvious that we have a very, very important spike on inflation.
I'm somewhat on the side of those who think that we may well have an incipient inflation problem.
Obviously, one needs to watch this very carefully.
The global supply chain is not working exactly as it should be.
Rise in raw materials is such that we have to act.
And our instinct is this will persist for some time.
From asset managers to manufacturers, paint makers to policymakers, inflation is a topic at the forefront of corporate concerns this year, and it's being worsened by climate change. In Brazil, at the end of July, a severe frost ravaged major Arabica coffee areas, and the timing of the cold snap meant that young plants were most at risk, which could affect production levels for years. Joseph Reyna, a grower in the south of Minas Gerais, said the freezing temperatures hurt as many as 120,000 coffee seedlings out of 200,000 planted less than a year ago. And that was borne out in coffee prices. Arabica futures, which account for 3/4 of the world's coffee production, surged 17%, topping $2 a pound for the first time since 2014.
Like most coffee suppliers, we are hedged, and so there's some forward cover here for the rest of this year and part of next year. But obviously at some point you run through that hedging position, and then you do face those higher prices.
Meanwhile, dry conditions in Canada, coupled with record-breaking heat, triggered hundreds of wildfires, with blazes spanning east across 5 provinces and nearly as far north as the Arctic Ocean. Fires have been so treacherous that thousands of rail cars carrying grain for export have been idled for weeks. The drought is also withering crops in Canada's breadbasket prairie provinces and in the northern US, forcing farmers to take the rare step of baling up their low-yielding wheat and barley stems to sell as livestock feed. Prices for the region's spring wheat and the variety used to make flour for bagels and pizza crusts recently touched the highest in more than 8 years.
The biggest pressure we have as it relates to inflation, because the price pressure or the need for us to increase prices comes from the fact that we're seeing inflation on our input cost, and that is the most pronounced in North America, in the US.
These price increases are ultimately to be transferred to the consumer. Inflation in June in the USA rose to 5.4%, the highest since 2008. Food prices have risen by 2.4% in the last 12 months. And when it comes to brands, J.M. Smucker, the US food company behind Folgers and Dunkin' Coffee, said it was planning to increase prices across varieties of categories in the last month.
The overall food inflation rate is not that much higher than it normally is. There are certain selected items in the grocery store that folks may see, at least for a period of time, increased costs. But we think this is going to even out, if you will.
But even if the economists and politicians say that price increases won't last, what's unique right now is that extreme weather seems to be pounding almost every region of the globe. No other industry is more at the mercy of sun, rain, and heat than agriculture. And when changes in the weather can upend a farmer's fortunes overnight, you might notice it with that morning cup of joe.